Hi everyone, my name is Jan and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. You may have noticed over the last few weeks that I've been posting less videos and also more news videos. And the main reason for that is that I've been working on a lot of other projects. So I've actually been doing a lot of filming, but I can't share it with you guys just yet. And I've also been working on a new website that has been taking up a lot of my time. But these projects are now in the finishing stages, so hopefully I can launch them and share them with you very soon. I'm also packing to go on a 2-month-long road trip to a destination that I had planned to go to 3 times already, but my health has forced me to cancel the trips every time. So now with the 4th attempt, I'm very hopeful that I will actually make it up there and photograph the last cockatoo species in Australia that I haven't photographed so far. If you know what it is, let me know in the comments. So hopefully it's going to be a good trip and I will be able to get some nice photos and videos of the birds that I'm after. I'm leaving tomorrow, so I'm just scrambling to pack everything, make sure that I have everything that I need. And I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but it's kind of ironic. If I wasn't traveling with my photography gear, I would basically only need this tiny bag with a few clothes. But now because we're photographers, we're just traveling with this insane amount of gear. So I'm planning to take 3 backpacks with me, my Naya Evo Fjord 60 liter, 50 liter, and a smaller one. And I'm also taking a few of these smaller cases like this extra small RCI and some of these nice little pouches that allow me to store my things away very easily. And if you want to get some Naya Evo gear, make sure to check out the link and your discount code down there in the description. For this trip, I also got myself a few helpers because in the past, I've always struggled to find the right setup to film myself in the field. And I want to give you some nice content, like when I'm surrounded by lots of cassowaries, for instance. I would like to have the ability to quickly film myself in the field. And that doesn't really work if I have a big mirrorless camera with a big lens on me. So for this trip, I decided I'm going to try out the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And it's just this tiny little camera. And from all the reviews that I've seen, it should be pretty good in filming myself, and just having that little gimbal and being able to actually sort of just stick it in my pocket should hopefully allow me to also be able to film myself nicely in the field and give you some nice high quality content. So all the reviews I've seen say it's pretty good. The only thing is that some people say it's not super reliable and sometimes doesn't turn on. So I'll have to see how I go with it. But for now, this seems like the perfect solution for me. And it also comes with a little sort of microphone I can put on my t-shirt, for instance, and have also good sound in the field. So I'm looking forward to using it and hopefully sharing some good footage with you guys as well. To get some better perspectives and more variety in the field, I also got myself a new drone, a Mavic 3 Pro, and I'm really looking forward to using that one as well. But getting this drone has actually been a bit of a funny story and a real battle. I wanted to get the combo with the RC Pro remote because it seems to connect slightly stronger to the drone, so if I'm flying into a gully or behind trees, I might not lose the signal as quickly, and it just seems to be a really nice piece of equipment. So I'm looking forward to using that. But the problem was that there was only one of these combos available in Australia, everywhere else had no stock. So I called up that shop, ordered the drone, gave them my new address, transferred them the money, and they shipped the drone. Suddenly I get a call from a friend who lives a few hundred kilometers away on the Gold Coast, and he's like, "Hey Jan, guess what arrived at my doorstep?" And so my drone somehow ended up at the Gold Coast because the shop changed my billing address, but not the shipping address. So I organized for the shop to pick it up. The problem was they couldn't ship it from my friend to me. They had to ship it back to Sydney and then to me. So my friend took it to his work, and a few days go by, the courier just never shows up. So the shop calls the courier again, and finally, after almost a week, the courier comes, picks up the drone, brings it back to Sydney. The shop calls me, "Everything is great, we have your drone, I'll send it to you." So on Thursday, they shipped the drone, and on Friday, when it was meant to arrive here, I get a phone call from my friend at the Gold Coast. And he's like, "Jan, you wouldn't believe what has showed up at my door." So they sent the drone to the Gold Coast for the 2nd time. And because there was no time left before my trip, I actually had to now drive almost a 6-hour round trip to get that drone. So now that I have it, I'm hopeful that I will also be able to use it and get some great footage with it because it was such a big battle to actually get it. In terms of the lenses and cameras I'm planning to use on this trip, I'm going to take 2 R5s, 1 R3, my RF 600mm f4 lens, the 100 to 500mm lens, the 200 to 800mm lens, a 24 to 105, and a 14 to 35. And of course, I'm also going to use the DJI Pocket 3 to film myself in the field. And sometime during that trip, I will also get the two R5 Mark IIs that I order, and will try to make a nice video for you guys the moment I get the cameras, depending on where I am. Because some of the time we will be in quite remote areas, so I don't know if I will have a lot of reception, but I'm definitely looking forward to actually be using the R5 Mark IIs on a real trip, giving you that real in the field experience and showing you how it works on a real mission to photograph some rare birds. The big discussion over the last few days and weeks was obviously Canon's release of the R5 Mark II and the R1. And Canon has copped a lot of negative feedback, some of it rightfully so, and some of it I think is quite unwarranted. Especially when it comes to the R5 Mark II. I think I've seen a lot of people say it's just a minor upgrade and they stick to their original R5, and that's definitely fine. But I think to call the R5 Mark II a minor upgrade is a little bit of an understatement, because I think compared to the original R5, it will most likely be better in basically every single way. We're going to have a stacked sensor that has significantly less rolling shutter. We're going to have a much improved and much better autofocus. From all I've seen from my friends using it in the field so far, it seems to be amazing at picking up even tiny small birds at quite a far distance. So I'm really looking forward to using that autofocus. And we also should be getting improved IBIS, which should make it even easier to handhold low shutter speeds in handheld video, for instance. And the biggest change in image quality that no one is actually talking about is that we now have 14-bit RAW files in all modes. And then one of the biggest downside of the original R5 is that it dumps down the files to just 12-bit with the electronic shutter. And we often talk about the difference between RAW and CRAW, but the difference between RAW and CRAW is very marginal, whereas the difference between 12-bit and 14-bit RAW files is quite astonishing. For instance, if you underexpose your files by 2 stops and then pull them up, you will see a lot of noise in the 12-bit RAW files and significantly less noise in the 14-bit RAW files. So to me, having all files available in 14-bit now will be a huge difference in image quality and is definitely welcome. And I'm also looking forward to using the pre-capture feature. It's a little bit limited because we can only choose half a second and then take like 15 extra images every time we press the shutter button. But at the same time, I think it's amazing Canon has managed to implement it in a proper way so that the RAW files are directly written onto our cards. So while I won't be using it all the time, it's definitely something that I'm looking for having available in the camera when I need it. And of course, I'm also looking forward to having 30 frames per second instead of 20 frames per second. When I was using Sony's A9 Mark III, I only realized how much the change in frames per second can actually help you to get better poses. Of course, that camera was amazing and shot at 120 frames per second, so you had an amazing selection of wing poses every time a bird would take off. So when I then went back to my 20 frames per second, it felt quite inadequate. So having that improved frames per second to 30 frames per second will definitely help. And from what I've heard from Canon, you will be able to assign sort of a speed boost button to one of the buttons on the R5 as well. So I might have 20 frames per second as my base rate, and then when I press a button, it will go to 30 frames per second. But other than the issues I foresee with the buffer, I think the R5 Mark II is definitely leading in its class now. It should have by far the best autofocus. Of course, the Nikon Z8 has a faster stack sensor, but I think the difference from 4 milliseconds to 6 point something milliseconds is hopefully not so dramatic anymore. So I'm definitely looking forward to using the R5 in the field and think it will be a fantastic upgrade. Of course, some of the upgrades don't sound like a lot on paper, but I think they will make a big difference in the field, at least for me and the way that I'm shooting. What are your thoughts on the R5 Mark II? Do you still feel like it's just a minor update or a major one? And no matter what camera you're using, I think one of the best ways to improve your overall photography is to get skilled and confident when it comes to image editing. So if you want to do exactly that, I would love to help you on your journey with my masterclass, my PROSETS and my brush pack. With my PROSETS, I allow you with just one click to transform your RAW files, and in my masterclass, I teach you step by step everything you need to know on Photoshop. And with my brush pack, I make layer masking in Photoshop so much easier for you. So if these are of interest to you, make sure to check them out down there in the description. Let's talk about a camera that everyone except for a few sports photographers seemed to have been disappointed of when it was announced. The Canon R1. And I think the main reason for that is not that it's a bad camera or has only 24 megapixels. The main reason is that we all had different expectations when we read the name flagship camera. Because when we read flagship camera, we think high megapixels, high frames per second, an overall amazing camera that's kind of that master of everything. whereas the R1 turned out to be a dedicated sports camera, and I think it will truly excel in that field. So some of the disappointment it's receiving is actually not really because it's a bad camera, but because the expectations of us were very different. So I think for sports and press photography, it will actually be an amazing camera. It will have by far the best autofocus. It has the amazing action priority where it literally knows which person has the ball, jumps on that person, even before you're able to see it in your viewfinder with your own eyes pretty much. So you will be able to get some amazing performance from that camera. But for most people, it's not actually what they want or need. So it's quite a niche camera. And so the question is, can a very niche camera be a flagship camera? And Canon clearly thinks so, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think the main reason people are disappointed is because in Canon land we have to choose between a pro body with a big battery that's weather sealed, can withstand any conditions, or a high megapixel camera like an R5 that has issues when it comes to shooting in heavy rain and also with the overheating. So to me, all Canon would need to do is simply offer an R5 Mark II equivalent sensor in an R3 body, and all the discussion about the R1 would completely go away, because now we could actually choose. We could choose the R1 if we want to shoot sports and fast action and want super clean files with that fast 24 megapixel sensor, or we can choose another R3 style Pro body with a high megapixel sensor similar to what we have in an R5 Mark II, for instance. Or if you want a smaller body, you don't care as much about the weather sealing, then you could use an R5 on R5 Mark II. And suddenly no one had any reason to complain anymore, because we can now choose what we want that suits the style of shooting that we need to do in the field. Whereas a lot of the problems that are arising, especially from nature photographers, is that we need a rugged body with a pro battery that can withstand all shooting conditions, and we need the high megapixels, especially if you're shooting birds. And I've seen so many people comment, if you need to crop, you're not a good photographer, or you need to get a bigger lens. But for bird photography, this is simply not true. Of course, a bigger lens helps, but at some stage you're just maxed out. And I think what people underestimate is how small birds are and how difficult it is to actually get close to them. The best example is a bird like this little red-capped robin. And I shot this at 1200 millimeters, right at the minimum focusing distance of about 4.5 meters, or around like 13 feet. So even with a 1200 millimeter lens, I have to be within 4 meters of a tiny bird to get it in a frame filling sort of position. And realistic shooting distance for birds is around 10 to 12 meters, or like 30 feet. And at that distance, a bird will simply be very small in your frame, because even a 1200 millimeter lens can only get you so far. And so that is why we sometimes need to crop and say that we have the need for higher megapixel camera. Of course, we can shoot with the 24 megapixels, but if I have the choice, I want to have the higher megapixel body. But I currently feel like Canon makes it very hard to have that choice, because we can only choose the pro body and then get low megapixels, or we can choose the high megapixels but get a body that's a little bit more limited and also has the smaller batteries that don't last as long. What are your thoughts on the whole situation? Are you still disappointed by the R1? Are you going to get one? Or do you agree with me that all we really need would be having two different pro bodies, one low megapixels for the sports shooters and one high megapixel for all of us wildlife people? There haven't been too many Sony or Nikon news, but one interesting thing I read was that the Z6 Mark III seems to be out of stock at many retailers at the moment. And Nikon Japan has actually said that there may be a bit of a shortage with the Z6 Mark III at the moment. Are you currently waiting for one, or do you have your Z6 Mark III already? Speaking about the Z6 III, it's definitely another video that I have upcoming where I compare to the Canon R6 Mark II, because I think it's two very interesting, very similar price cameras that have kind of the opposite performance. And what I mean by that, you will find out in my video that I will share with you very soon. When it comes to Sony, we also haven't heard too much. They recently launched the ZV-E10 Mark II, which seems like an interesting vlogging camera, but for me, I decided I want something even smaller, like this DJI Osmo Pocket 3 that I recently bought. I looked at some of the Sony offerings as well, but I thought for me, the Pocket and being able to actually stick it literally in one of my pockets on my pants will be helpful if I just need to do some real quick in the field footage. One camera we thought that might be announced this year is the Sony A1 Mark II or the Sony A7 IV, but for now we haven't really heard much about either camera, and Sony Alpha Rumors recently said that it looks like that the Sony A7 IV will only be announced sometime next year. So it seems like we might not be seeing any new Sony cameras this year, at least the sort of higher end one, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what they will be like, especially the Sony A1 Mark II is shaping up to be, I think, quite an amazing camera. And if we go by what the A9 Mark III can offer at the moment, I think the A1 Mark II will definitely be a camera that a lot of wildlife photographers would be very interested in, because I would expect it to have probably at least 50 megapixels and maybe even shoot at like 60 frames per second, which would be very amazing. And hopefully, compared to original R1, it will finally also have proper tracking in video mode. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this week's early bird photo news. I now have to edit this video and also still stuff all my stuff into my backpack. So there's still a few hours of work ahead of me. And I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. What are your thoughts on the R5 and the R1 now? Are you going to keep your R5 or are you going to upgrade to an R5 Mark II? Let me know in the comments. Also share with me, what do you do when you travel? Are you like me? Do you only take one pair of pants, 2 t-shirts, and the rest is all camera gear? Let me know in the comments. Also check out my channel membership. Give me a like for the video and hit that subscribe button. And I will see you guys in another video very soon. Bye.